Chapter 9. Industry and Infrastructure. Rapid growth of unskilled labor-intensive sectors is likely to create many more opportunities for the poor than rapid growth of capital and skilled labor-intensive sectors. Such a shift would reinforce rather than impede aggregate growths. Introduction. Many of the Western economies have already written their success stories of industrialization leading to accelerated growth and development by the time India became an independent economy. Independent India needed to rejuvenate its economy from a completely dilapidated state. The country had many tasks in front of it: the abject mass poverty, shortage of food grains, healthcare, etc., calling for immediate attention. The other areas of attention included industry, infrastructure, science and technology, and higher education, to name a few. All these areas of development required heavy capital investment, as they had been severely avoided by the colonial ruler for the last 150 years or so. Increasing the growth of the economy, and that too with a faster pace, was the urgent need of the economy. Looking at the pros and cons of the available options, India decided that the industrial sector should be the prime moving force, PMF, of the economy, the logical choice for faster growth, a fully established idea at that time, the world over. The secondary sector will lead the economy was well decided in the 1930s itself by the dominant political forces among the freedom fighters. As the government of the time had decided upon an active role for the governments in the economy, naturally, the industrial sector was to have a dominant state role, the expansion of the government-owned companies, i.e., the PSUs, to glorious heights. In many ways, the development of the Indian economy has been the development of the government sector. Once this idea of state's role in the economy went for a radical change in the early 1990s with the process of economic reforms, the hangover or the drag of it is still visible on the economy. The industrial policies, which the governments announced from time to time, basically molded the very nature and structure of the economy. Any discussion on the Indian economy must start with a survey of the industrial policies of the country. Here we have a brief review of the various industrial policies of India till date. Review of industrial policies up to 1986. For a better understanding of the Indian economy, it is advisable to look into the various industrial policies. The official stances keep changing with every upcoming industrial policy. Understanding these policies become even more important to understand the finer aspects of the reform process which the country will commence by the early 1990s. Here, a brief review of India's industrial policies are being discussed to serve the purpose. Industrial Policy Resolution, 1948. Announced on 8 April 1948, this was not only the first industrial policy statement of India, but also decided the model of the economic system, i.e., the mixed economy, too. Thus, it was the first economic policy of the country. The major highlights of the policy are given below. 1. India will be a mixed economy. 2. Some of the important industries were put under the central list, such as coal, power, railways, civil aviation, arms and ammunition, defense, etc. 3. Some other industries, usually of medium category, were put under a state list such as paper, medicines, textiles, cycles, rickshaws, two-wheelers, etc. 4. Rest of the industries, not covered by either the central or the state lists, were left open for private sector investment, with many of them having the provision of compulsory licensing. 5. There was a 10-year period for review of the policy. Industrial Policy Resolution, 1956. The government was encouraged by the impact of the industrial policy of 1948, and it was only after 8 years that the new and more crystallized policies were announced for the Indian industries. The new industrial policy of 1956 had the following major provisions. 1. Reservation of industries. A clear-cut classification of industries, also known as the Reservation of Industries, were effected with 3 schedules. 1. Schedule A. This schedule had 17 industrial areas in which the centre was given complete monopoly. The industries set up under this provision were known as the Central Public Sector Undertakings, CPSUs, later getting popularity as PSUs. Though the number of industries were only 17, the number of PSUs set up by the Government of India went to 254 by 1991. These included those industrial units too which were taken over by the government between 1960 to 1980 under the nationalization drives. These industries belonged to Schedules B and C, other than Schedule A. Schedule B. There were 12 industrial areas put under this schedule, in which the state governments were supposed to take up the initiatives, with a more expansive follow-up by the private sector. This schedule also carried the provisions of compulsory licensing. It should be noted here that neither the states nor the private sector had monopolies in these industries, unlike Schedule A, which provided monopoly to the centre. 3. Schedule C. All industrial areas left out of Schedules and B were put under this, in which the private enterprises had the provisions to set up industries. Many of them had the provisions of licensing and have necessarily to fit into the framework of the social and economic policy of the state and were subject to control and regulation in terms of the Industries Development and Regulation (IDR) Act and other relevant legislations. The above classification of industries had an inbuilt bias in favor of government-owned companies, i.e., the CPSUs, which went according to the ideas of the planning process, too. Thus, expansion of the public sector became almost a directive principle of economic policy, and the PSUs did expand in the coming times. It was this industrial policy, in which the then PM Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru had termed the PSUs the temples of modern India, symbolically pointing to their importance. There was a time soon after independence when the PSUs were regarded as the principal instrument for raising savings and growth in the economy. The rapid expansion of PSUs accounted for more than half of the GDP of the economy by 1988 to 89. 2. Provision of licensing. One of the most important developments of independent India, the provision of compulsory licensing for industries, was cemented in this policy. All the Schedule B industries and a number of Schedule C industries came under this provision. This provision established the so-called license quota permit regime, RAJ, in the economy. 3. Expansion of the public sector. Expansion of the public sector was pledged for the accelerated industrialization and growth in the economy. Glorification of government companies did start with this policy. The emphasis was on heavy industries. 4. Regional disparity. To tackle the widening regional disparity, the policy committed to set up the upcoming PSUs in the comparatively backward and underdeveloped regions or areas in the economy. 5. Emphasis on small industries. There was emphasis on small industries as well as the khadi and village industries. 6. Agricultural sector. The agricultural sector was pledged as a priority. Importance. This is considered as the most important industrial policy of India by the experts, as it decided not only the industrial expansion but structured the very nature and scope of the economy till 1991 with minor modifications. All the industrial policies were nothing but minor modifications in it except the new industrial policy of 1991, which affected deeper and structural changes in it, with which India started a wider process of economic reforms. Industrial Policy Statement, 1969. This was basically a licensing policy, which aimed at solving the shortcomings of the licensing policy started by the Industrial Policy of 1956. The experts and industrialists, newcomers, complained that the industrial licensing policy was serving just the opposite purpose for which it was mooted. Inspired by the socialistic ideals and nationalistic feelings, the licensing policy had the following reasons: 1. Exploitation of resources for the development of all. 2. Priority of resource exploitation for the industries. 3. Price control of the goods produced by the licensed industries. 4. Checking concentration of economic power. 5. Channelizing investment into desired direction, according to the planning process. In practice, the licensing policy was not serving the above given purpose properly. A powerful industrial house was always able to procure fresh licenses at the cost of a new budding entrepreneur. The price regulation policy via licensing was aimed at helping the public by providing cheaper goods, but it indirectly served the private licensed industries ultimately, as central subsidies were given to the private companies from where it was to benefit the poor in the form of cheaper goods. Similarly, the older and well-established industrial houses were capable of creating hurdles for the newer ones with the help of different kinds of trade practices, forcing the latter to agree for sellouts and takeovers. A number of committees were set up by the government to look into the matter and suggest remedies. The Committees on Industrial Licensing Policy Review not only pointed out several shortcomings of the policy, but also accepted the useful role of industrial licensing. Finally, it was in 1969 that the new industrial licensing policy was announced, which affected the following major changes in the area. 1. The Monopolistic and Restrictive Trade Practices (MRTP) Act was passed. The Act intended to regulate the trading and commercial practices of the firms and checking monopoly and concentration of economic power. 2. The firms with assets of 25 crore rupees or more were put under obligation of taking permission from the Government of India before any expansion, greenfield venture, and takeover of other firms, as per the MRTP Act. Such firms came to be known as the MRTP companies. The upper limit, known as the MRTP limit, for such companies was revised upward to 50 crore rupees in 1980 and 100 crore rupees in 1985. 3. For the redressal of the prohibited and restricted practices of trade, the government did set up an MRTP Commission. Industrial Policy Statement, 1973. The Industrial Policy Statement of 1973 introduced some new thinking into the economy, with major ones being as follows. 1. A new classificatory term I, core industries, was created. The industries which were of fundamental importance for the development of industries were put in this category, such as iron and steel, cement, coal, crude oil, oil refining, and electricity. In the future, these industries came to be known as basic industries, infrastructure industries in the country. 2. Out of the 6 core industries defined by the policy, the private sector may apply for licenses for the industries which were not a part of Schedule A of the Industrial Policy, 1956. The private firms eligible to apply for such licenses were supposed to have their total assets at 20 crore rupees or more. 3. Some industries were put under the reserved list, in which only the small or medium industries could be set up. 4. The concept of joint sector was developed, which allowed partnership among the center, state, and the private sector while setting up some industries. The governments had the discretionary power to exit such ventures in future. Here, the government wanted to promote the private sector with state support. 5. The government of India had been facing the foreign exchange crunch during that time. To regulate foreign exchange, the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act, FERA, was passed in 1973. Experts have called it a draconian act which hampered the growth and modernization of Indian industries. 6. A limited permission to foreign investment was given, with the multinational corporations, MNCs, being allowed to set up subsidiaries in the country. Industrial Policy Statement, 1977. The Industrial Policy Statement of 1977 was chalked out by a different political setup from the past with a different political fervor. The dominant voice in the government was having an anti-Indira stance with an inclination towards the Gandhian socialistic views towards the economy. We see such elements in this policy statement. 1. Foreign investment in the unnecessary areas were prohibited, opposite to the IPS of 1973 which promoted foreign investment via technology transfer in the areas of lack of capital or technology. In practice, there was a complete no to foreign investment. 2. Emphasis on village industries with a redefinition of the small and cottage industries. 3. Decentralized industrialization was given attention with the objective of linking the masses to the process of industrialization. The district industries centers, DICs, were set to promote the expansion of small and cottage industries at a mass scale. 4. Democratic decentralization got emphasized, and the khadi and village industries were restructured. 5. Serious attention was given on the level of production and the prices of essential commodities of everyday use. Industrial Policy Resolution, 1980. The year 1980 saw the return of the same political party at the center. The new government revised the Industrial Policy of 1977 with few exceptions in the Industrial Policy Resolution, 1980. The major initiatives of the policy were as given below. 1. Foreign investment via the technology transfer route was allowed again, similar to the provisions of the IPS, 1973. 2. The MRTP limit was revised upward to 50 crore rupees to promote setting of bigger companies. 3. The DICs were continued with. 4. Industrial licensing was simplified. 5. Overall liberal attitude followed towards the expansion of private industries. Industrial Policy Resolution, 1985 and 1986. The industrial policy resolutions announced by the governments in 1985 and 1986 were very much similar in nature, and the latter tried to promote the initiative of the former. The main highlights of the policies are: 1. Foreign investment was further simplified with more industrial areas being open for their entries. The dominant method of foreign investment remained, as in the past, i.e., technology transfer. But now the equity holding of the MNCs in the Indian subsidiaries could be up to 49%, with the Indian partner holding the rest of the 51% shares. 2. The MRTP limit was revised upward to 100 crore rupees, promoting the idea of bigger companies. 3. The provision of industrial licensing was simplified. Compulsory licensing now remained for 64 industries only. 4. High-level attention on the Sunrise industries such as telecommunication, computerization and electronics. 5. Modernization and the profitability aspects of public sector undertakings were emphasized. 6. Industries based on imported raw materials got a boost. 7. Under the overall regime of FERA, some relaxations concerning the use of foreign exchange was permitted so that essential technology could be assimilated into Indian industries an international standard could be achieved. 8. The agriculture sector was attended with a new scientific approach, with many technology missions being launched by the government. These industrial policies were mooted out by the government when the developed world was pushing for the formation of the WTO, and the new world economic order looked like a reality. Once the world had become one market, only bigger industrial firms could have managed to cater to such a big market. Side by side, sorting out the historical hurdles to industrial expansion perpetuated by the past industrial policies, these new industrial policy resolutions were basically a preparation for the globalized future world. These industrial provisions were attempted at liberalizing the economy without any slogan of economic reforms. The government of the time had the mood and willingness of going for the kind of economic reforms which India pursued post-1991, but it lacked the required political support. The industrial policies conjoined with the overall microeconomic policy followed by the government had one major loophole, that it was more dependent on foreign capital, with a big part being costlier ones. Once the economy could not meet industrial performance, it became tough for India to service the external borrowings, the external events. The Gulf War, 1990-91, vitiated the situation too. Finally, by the end of 1980s, India was in the grip of a severe balance of payment crisis with higher rate of inflation, over 13%, and higher fiscal deficit, over 8%. The deep crisis put the economy in a financial crunch, which made India opt for a new way of economic management in the coming times. New Industrial Policy, 1991. It were the industrial policies of past which had shaped the nature and structure of the Indian economy. The need of the hour was to change the nature and structure of the economy by early 1990s. The Government of India decided to change the very nature of the industrial policy, which will automatically lead to change in the nature and scope of the economy. And here came the new industrial policy of 1991. With this policy, the government kickstarted the very process of reform in the economy. That is why the policy is taken more as a process than a policy. Background: India was faced with severe balance of payment crisis by June 1991. Basically, in early 1990s there were interconnected set of events which were growing unfavorable for the Indian economy. 1. Due to the Gulf War, 1990-91, the higher oil prices were fastly depleting India's foreign reserves. 2. Sharp decline in the private remittances from the overseas Indian workers in the wake of the Gulf War, especially from the Gulf region. 3. Inflation peaking at nearly 17%. 4. The gross fiscal deficit of the central government reaching 8.4% of the GDP. 5. By the month of June 1991, India's foreign exchange had declined to just 2 weeks of import coverage. India's near miss with a serious balance of payments crisis was the proximate cause that started India's market liberalization measures in 1991, followed by a gradualist approach. As the reforms were induced by the crisis of the BOP, the initial phase focused on macroeconomic stabilization, while the reforms of industrial policy, trade and exchange rate policies, foreign investment policy, financial and tax reforms as well as public sector reforms did also follow soon. The financial support India received from the IMF to fight out the BOP crisis of 1990-91 were having a tag of conditions to be fulfilled by India. These IMF conditionalities required the Indian economy to go for a structural readjustment. As the nature and scope of the economy were molded by the various industrial policies India did follow till date, any desired change in the economic structure had to be induced with the help of another industrial policy. The new industrial policy, announced by the government on 23 July 1991, had initiated a bigger process of economic reforms in the country, seriously motivated towards the structural readjustment naturally obliged to fulfill IMF conditionalities. The major highlights of the policy are as follows. 1. De-reservation of the industries. The industries which were reserved for the central government by the IPR 1956 were cut down to only 8. In coming years, many other industries were also opened for private sector investment. At present, there are only 2 industries which are fully or partially reserved for the central government. 1. Atomic energy and nuclear research and other related activities, i.e., mining, use management, fuel fabrication, export-import, waste management, etc., of radioactive minerals. None of the nuclear powers in the world have allowed entry of private sector players in these activities, thus no such attempts look logical in India. 2. Railways. Many of the functions related to the railways have been allowed private entry, but still the private sector cannot enter the sector as a full-fledged railway service provider. 2. Delicensing of the industries. The number of industries put under the compulsory provision of licensing belonging to Schedules B and C as per the IPR 1956 were cut down to only 18. Reforms regarding the area were further followed, and presently there are only 4 industries which carry the burden of compulsory licensing. 1. Aerospace and defense-related electronics. 2. Gunpowder, industrial explosives and detonating fuels. 3. Dangerous chemicals. 4. Tobacco, cigarette and related products. 3. Abolition of the MRTP limit. The MRTP limit was 100 crore rupees so that the mergers, acquisitions and takeovers of the industries could become possible. In 2002, a Competition Act was passed which has replaced the MRTP Act. In place of the MRTP Commission, the Competition Commission has started functioning, though there are still some hitches regarding the compositional form of the latter and its real functions and jurisdictions. 4. Promotion to foreign investment. Functioning as a typical closed economy, the Indian economy had never shown any good faith towards foreign capital. The new industrial policy was a path-breaking step in this regard. Not only the draconian FERA was committed to be diluted, but the government went to encourage foreign investment, FE, in both its forms, direct and indirect. The direct form of FE was called as the Foreign Direct Investment, FDI, under which the MNCs were allowed to set up their firms in India in the different sectors varying from 26% to 100% ownership with them. Enron and Coke being the flag bearers. The FDI started in 1991 itself. The indirect form of foreign investment, i.e., in the assets owned by the Indian firms in equity capital, was called the Portfolio Investment Scheme, PIS, in the country, which formally commenced in 1994. Under the PIS, the foreign institutional investors, FIIs, having good track record, are allowed to invest in the Indian security or stock market. The FIIs need to register themselves as a stockbroker with SEBI. It means India has not allowed individual foreign investment in the security market still, only institutional investment has been allowed till now. 5. FERA replaced by FEMA. The government committed in 1991 itself to replace the draconian FERA with a highly liberal FEMA, which came into effect in the year 2001 with a sunset clause of 2 years. 6. Location of industries. Related provisions were simplified by the policy, which was highly cumbersome and had time-consuming process. Now, the industries were classified into polluting and non-polluting categories, and a highly simple provision deciding their location was announced. 1. Non-polluting industries might be set up anywhere. 2. Polluting industries to be set up at least 25 kilometers away from the million cities. 7. Compulsion of phased production abolished. With the compulsion of phased production abolished, now the private firms could go for producing as many goods and models simultaneously. Now the capacity and capital of industries could be utilized to their optimum level. 8. Compulsion to convert loans into shares abolished. The policy of nationalization started by the Government of India in the late 1960s was based on the sound logic of greater public benefit and had its origin in the idea of welfare state. It was criticized by the victims and the experts alike. In the early 1970s, the Government of India came with a new idea of it. The major banks of the country were now fully nationalized, 14 in number by that time, which had to mobilize resources for the purpose of planned development of India. The private companies who had borrowed capital from these banks, when the banks were privately owned, now wanted their loans to be paid back. The government came with a novel provision for the companies who were unable to repay their loans. Most of them were like it. They could opt to convert their loan amounts into equity shares and hand them over to the banks. The private companies which opted this route, this was a compulsory option, ultimately became a government-owned company, as the banks were owned by the Government of India. This was an indirect route to nationalize private firms. Such a compulsion, which hampered the growth and development of the Indian industries, was withdrawn by the government in 1991. The picture presented by the new industrial policy of 1991 was taken by many experts, the opposition in the parliament, and even the public figures, as well as the business and industry of the country, as a ruin back of the state. The glorious role given to the state by the Nehruvian economy seemed completely toppled down. Any one idea the new policy challenged was an emphatic goodbye to the control regime perpetuated till now by the government. There was a coalition of interests of politicians, bureaucrats, multinationals, as well as the domestic industrial and business houses whose interests were sheltered and by the control regime. Thus, a memorandum to the government requesting not to dismantle the control regime by the major industrial houses of India, as well as arrival of the Swadeshi Jagran Manch, were not illogical. But the governments continued with the reform program with politically permissible pace, and a time came when the same industrial houses requested the government, 2002, to expedite the process of reform. Now the Indian industry and business class has been able to understand the economics of openness and a different kind of the mixed economy. But the process of reforms have still to go miles before its real benefits start reaching the masses, and development together with reform could be made a mass movement. This is why experts have suggested that only assuming that reforms will benefit the masses will not be enough to make it happen politically, but the governments, the administrative agencies, and the economists all need to link it positively to mass welfare. It might require to create a popular climate and form the political coalitions in favor of the argument that privatization and accordingly restructured labor laws are basically aimed at creating jobs, better job prospects, alleviating poverty, enriching education, and providing health care to the masses. In the coming times, the government went from one to another generations of the reforms, setting new targets, and every time trying to make reforms socio-politically possible. Disinvestment. Government-owned firms, namely the public sector undertakings, PSUs, and public sector enterprises, PSEs, played a foundational role in India's development process. Realizing the changed situations, the government decided to redefine disinvestment and privatization, the role for these firms once reform process began in 1991. By that time, the government had invested a total of 2.4 lakh rupees crores in 244 firms, the journey with 5 firms, and a modest investment of 29 crores rupees in March 1951. Rather, the process of setting up new government firms did not stop, and by 2019, government is invested with 16.41 lakh rupees crores in a total number of 348 such firms. Disinvestment is the process of selling ownership in a company. Technically, the term may be used in case of any company, i.e., privately owned company, but in practice, it is used only in case of a government-owned company. Disinvestment commenced in the country with 3 interrelated coordinates: 1. As a tool of public sector reforms, 2. As a part of the economic reform process, i.e., as part of the de-reservation of industries, and 3. As a tool of resource mobilization for budgetary needs. The approach towards public sector reforms in India has been much more cautious than that of the other developing countries. India did not follow the radical solution to it, under which outright privatization of commercially viable PSUs is done and the unviable ones are completely closed. There was an emphasis on increasing functional autonomy of public sector organizations to improve their efficiency in the 1980s in India as part of the public sector reforms. Once the process of economic reforms started in the early 1990s, disinvestment became a part of the public sector reforms. The C. Rangarajan Commission on Disinvestment of the Public Sector Enterprises, 1991, went on to suggest the government on the issue in a highly commendable and systematic way, taking empirical notes from the experiences of disinvestment around the world. The government started the process of disinvestment in 1991 itself. In 1997, the government did set up a disinvestment commission to advise upon the various aspects of the disinvestment process. The financial year 1999 to 2000 saw a serious attempt by the government to make disinvestment a political process to expedite the process of disinvestment in the country. First, a disinvestment department and later a full-fledged Ministry of Disinvestment was set up. The new government, UPA, dismantled the Ministry of Disinvestment, and today only the Department of Disinvestment is taking care of the matter, working under the Ministry of Finance. Types of disinvestment. Since the process of disinvestment was started in India, 1991, it's consisted of 2 official types. A brief discussion on them is given below. 1. Token disinvestment. Disinvestment started in India with a high political caution, in a symbolic way known as the token disinvestment, presently being called as minority stake sale. The general policy was to sell the shares of the PSUs maximum up to the 49%, i.e., maintaining government ownership of the companies. But in practice, shares were sold to the tune of 5 to 10% only. This phase of disinvestment, though, brought some extra funds to the government, which were used to fill up the fiscal deficit. Considering the proceeds as the capital receipts, it could not initiate any new element to the PSUs, which could enhance their efficiency. It remained the major criticism of this type of disinvestment, and experts around the world started suggesting the government to go for it in the way that the ownership could be transferred from the government to the private sector. The other hot issue raised by the experts was related to the question of using the proceeds of disinvestment. 2. Strategic disinvestment. In order to make disinvestment a process by which efficiency of the PSUs could be enhanced and the government could deburden itself of the activities in which the private sector has developed better efficiency, so that the government could concentrate on the areas which have no attraction for the private sector, such as social sector support for the poor masses, the government initiated the process of strategic disinvestment. The government classifying the PSUs into strategic and non-strategic announced in March 1999 that it will generally reduce its stake, shareholding, in the non-strategic public sector enterprises, PSEs, to 26% or below if necessary, and in the strategic PSEs, i.e., arms and ammunition, atomic energy, and related activities, and railways, it will retain its majority holding. There was a major shift in the disinvestment policy from selling small lots of share in the profit-making PSUs, i.e., token disinvestment, to the strategic sale with change in management control both in profit and loss-making enterprises. The essence of the strategic disinvestment was: 1. The minimum shares to be divested will be 51%, and 2. The wholesale sale of shares will be done to a strategic partner having international class experience and expertise in the sector. This form of disinvestment commenced with the Modern Food Industries Limited, MFIL. The second PSUs was the BALCO, which invited every kind of criticism from the opposition political parties, the government of Chhattisgarh, and experts alike. The other PSUs were CMC Ltd, HTL, IBPL, VSNL, ITDC, 13 Hotels, Hotel Corporation of India Limited, 3 Hotels, Paradeep Phosphate Ltd, TPL, HZL, IPCL, Mool and Lagan Jute Manufacturing Company Limited, LJMC. A total number of 13 public sector enterprises were part of the strategic sale or strategic disinvestment of the PSEs. The new government at the center did put this policy of strategic disinvestment on the hold practically and came up with a new policy in place. Current disinvestment policy. India's disinvestment policy has evolved over time since it commenced in 1991. It has two major features: ideology behind the policy and the policy itself. The ideology behind the policy is 1. Public ownership of PSUs to be promoted as they are wealth of nation. 2. Government to hold minimum 51% shares in case of minority stake sale. And 3. Up to 50% or more shares might be sold off under strategic disinvestment. The current policy of disinvestment followed by the government is as given below. 1. Minority stake sale. The policy of November 2009 continues. Listed PSUs to be taken first to comply to minimum 25% new PSUs to be listed which have earned net profit in 3 preceding consecutive years. Follow on public offers on case-by-case basis once capital investment needed. And DIPAM, Department of Investment and Public Asset Management, to identify PSUs and suggest disinvestment in consultation with respective ministries. 2. Strategic disinvestment, i.e., selling 50% or more shares of the PSUs, announced in February 2016, to be done through consultation among ministries or departments and Niti Aayog to identify PSUs and advise on its different aspects, and CGD, Core Group of Secretaries on Disinvestment, to consider the recommendations of Niti Aayog to facilitate a decision by the CCA, Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs, and to supervise or monitor the implementation process. By April 2020, while 57 public sector undertakings were listed with total market capitalization of over 13 lakh rupees crores, new proposals of disinvestment in over 24 PSUs were under consideration, mostly under strategic route. The decision, Union Budget 2020 to 2021, to sell minority stake in the LIC through initial public offer, IPO, is among the most significant disinvestment decisions of the recent times. Comprehensive management of public assets. Since 2016, disinvestment has become a part of the broader policy known as the comprehensive management of government, the public assets. Before announcing the current disinvestment policy, the government changed the name of the existing Department of Disinvestment to the Department of Investment and Public Asset Management, DIPAM, along with its mandate from taking care of disinvestment to comprehensive management of the government's investment in the CPSEs. Under it, the following 4 actions are to be taken in regard to the CPSEs. 1. Achieving optimum return and accelerating growth. 2. Leveraging assets by capital and financial restructuring. 3. Improving investors' confidence through capital market exposure. 4. Rationalizing decision-making process for efficient management. The policy considers the CPSEs as an important financial asset and aims to use them for realizing a variety of goals such as economic return, investment, growth acceleration, etc. The steps like monetization for debt management and capital expenditures, buyback of shares by the PSUs having huge surplus, merger and acquisition among the PSUs in the same sector, and launch of exchange-traded funds, ETFs, etc. are being taken under it. As private sector keeps exploring all possibilities to employ their investment in the best possible way and run their firms on business line, government also looks aiming at similar policy in case of the public assets. Such a policy shift in case of the CPSEs, however, has come very late, which was proposed by the late 1980s itself and looked essential once economic reforms commenced in the country. The policy will not only unshackle the hidden economic potential of the CPSEs, but also help in creating a healthy market for growth and expansion of the private sector in particular, and economy in general. Proceeds of disinvestment. Debate concerning the use. In the very next year of disinvestment, there started a debate in the country concerning the suitable use of the proceeds of disinvestment, i.e., accruing to the government out of the sale of the shares in the PSUs. The debate has by now evolved to a certain stage, coming off basically in 3 phases. Phase I. This phase could be considered from 1991 to 2000, in which whatever money the governments received out of disinvestment were used for fulfilling the budgetary requirements, better say bridging the gap of fiscal deficit. Phase 2. This phase, which has a very short span, 2003, saw 2 new developments. First, the government started a practice of using the proceeds not only for fulfilling the need of fiscal deficit, but used the money for some other good purposes, such as reinvestment in the PSEs, repayment of public debt, and on the social sector. Second, by the early 2000s, a broad consensus emerged on the issue of the proposal by the then Finance Minister. The proposal regarding the use of the proceeds of disinvestment was as given below. Some portions of the disinvestment proceeds should be used: 1. In the divested PSU itself for upgrading purposes, 2. In the turnaround of the other PSUs, 3. In the public debt repayment or prepayment, 4. In the social infrastructure, education, healthcare, etc. 5. In the rehabilitation of the labor force of the divested PSUs, and 6. In fulfilling the budgetary requirements. Phase 3. 2 major developments of this phase are as given below. 1. National Investment Fund. In January 2005, the Government of India decided to constitute a National Investment Fund, NIF, which has the following salient features. 1. The proceeds from disinvestment will be channelized into the NIF, which is to be maintained outside the Consolidated Fund of India. 2. The corpus of the National Investment Fund will be of a permanent nature. 3. The fund will be professionally managed to provide sustainable returns without depleting the corpus by selected public sector mutual funds. They are UTI Asset Management Company Limited, SBI Funds Management Company PVT Limited, LIC Mutual Fund Asset Management Company Limited. 4. "75% of the annual income of the fund will be used to finance selected social sector schemes which promote education, health, and employment. The residual 25% of the annual income of the fund will be used to meet the capital investment requirements of profitable and revivable PSUs that yield adequate returns in order to enlarge their capital base to finance expansion or diversification." The income from the NIF investments was utilized on selected social sector schemes, namely the Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission (JNUR), Accelerated Irrigation Benefits Program (AIBP), Rajiv Gandhi Gramin Vidyutikran Yojana (RGGY), Accelerated Power Development and Reform Program, Indira Awas Yojana and National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme (NREGS). 2. Restructuring of NIF. In November 2009, the government approved a change in the policy on utilization of disinvestment proceeds. In view of the difficult situation caused by the global slowdown of 2008-09 and a severe drought in 2009-10, a one-time exemption was accorded to disinvestment proceeds being deposited into NIF to be operational for the fiscals 2009-12, which was further extended to 2012-13, in view of the persistent difficult condition of the economy. All disinvestment proceeds, in place of the income accruing out of the investment of the NIF corpus, obtained during the 3-year period were to be used for selected social sector schemes. Current policy. In January 2013, which was further revised in February 2013, the government approved restructuring of the NIF and decided that the disinvestment proceeds with effect from the fiscal year 2013-14 will be credited to the existing public account under the head NIF, and they would remain there until withdrawn or invested for the approved purposes. It was decided that the NIF would be utilized for the following purposes: 1. Subscribing to the shares being issued by the CPSE including PSBs and public sector insurance companies on rights basis so as to ensure 51% government ownership in them. 2. Preferential allotment of shares of the CPSE to promoters so that government shareholding does not go down below 51% in all cases where the CPSE is going to raise fresh equity to meet its capex program. 3. Recapitalization of public sector banks and public sector insurance companies. 4. Investment by the government in RRBs, IIFCL, NABARD, Exim Bank. 5. Equity infusion in various metro projects. 6. Investment in Bharatiya Nabhikiya Vidyut Nigam Limited and Uranium Corporation of India Limited. 7. Investment in Indian Railways towards capital expenditure. The allocations out of the NIF will be decided in the government budget. This way, the policy regarding use of the disinvestment proceeds has become flexible enough to adjust to the current socio-economic needs. Targets of proceeds. Proceeds of disinvestment, classified as non-debt capital receipt, have emerged as a major source of fund for central government's budgetary allocations. We see government setting ambitious targets of it in recent years. For the year 2019 to 2020, the target was set at 1.05 lakh rupees crore, later revised downward to 65,000 crores rupees. Rather, till late February, only 34,845 rupees and 6 paise could be mobilized. The Union Budget 2020 to 2021 has set a disinvestment target of 2.10 lakh rupees crores, in which 90,000 crores rupees are to be mobilized out of disinvestment of public sector banks and financial institutions. MSME sector. As per the SMSE Act 2006, the MSME are classified in two classes, manufacturing and service enterprises, and they are defined in terms of investment in plant and machinery. The micro, small and medium enterprises, MSMEs, play a very vital role in the economy. 3.6 crore such units employ 8.05 crore people and contribute 37.5% to the country's GDP. The sector has huge potential for helping address structural problems like unemployment, regional imbalances, unequal distribution of national income and wealth. Due to comparatively low capital costs and their forward-backward linkages with other sectors, they are headed to play a crucial role in the success of the Make in India initiative. Realizing the importance of the sector, over the time, the government has undertaken a number of schemes for the establishment of new enterprises and development of existing ones like 1. PMEGP, Prime Minister's Employment Generation Program, 2. CGTMSE, Credit Guarantee Trust Fund for Micro and Small Enterprises, 3. CLCSS, Credit Linked Capital Subsidy Scheme for Technology Upgradation, 4. Sphurti, Scheme of Fund for Regeneration of Traditional Industries, and 5. MSECDP, Micro and Small Enterprises Cluster Development Program. Some of the recent initiatives undertaken by the government for the promotion and development of the MSMEs have been as given below. 1. Udyog Aadhaar Memorandum, the scheme, notified in September 2015 to promote ease of doing business. Under it, entrepreneurs just need to file an online entrepreneurs memorandum to get a unique Udyog Aadhaar number, a significant improvement over the earlier complex and cumbersome procedure. 2. Employment exchange for industries, to facilitate matchmaking between prospective job seekers and employers. An employment exchange for industries was set up in June 2015, in line with Digital India. 3. Framework for revival and rehabilitation of MSMEs. Under this, May 2015, banks need to constitute a committee for distressed MSMEs to prepare a corrective action plan, CAP, for them. 4. Aspire, Promoting Innovation and Rural Entrepreneurs, launched in March 2015 with the objective of setting up a network of technology and incubation centers to accelerate entrepreneurship and promote startups for innovation and entrepreneurship in rural and agriculture-based industry. Enhancing ease of doing business for the sector and their faster growth have been given special attention by the government in the last few years, with following policy steps taken till early 2020. Loans up to 1 crore rupees to be approved online within 59 minutes. Interest subvention of 2% to all GST registered firms, PSUs to compulsorily procure 25%, up from 20%, with 3% reserved for women entrepreneurs, through GEM portal, 20 technology centers, TCS, and 100 extension centers, ECs, to be established. Government to bear 70% of the cost for establishing pharma clusters. Returns under 8 labor laws and 10 union regulations to be filed once in a year. Establishments to be visited by an inspector will be decided through a computerized random allotment. Single consent under air and water pollution laws, returns to be accepted through self-certification and only 10% units to be inspected, and for minor violations under the Companies Act, entrepreneurs no longer have to approach court but can correct them through simple procedures. Sectoral concerns. Due to several global and domestic reasons to industrial sectors, namely steel and aluminium, are presently faced with certain challenges. Though the government has taken several timely steps, they are still faced with huge challenges. Steel industry. Due to global and domestic factors, Indian steel industry has been faced with certain problems in recent times. India is the second biggest producer of steel in the world after China, though there is big gap between their contribution in the global steel production. India's share at 6% in comparison to China's share of 53.8%. On the other hand, India is the third largest consumer, 5.7% of the metal in the world after China, 48.8%, and the USA, 5.8%. Caused by global slowdown and protectionist trade policies of several countries in the world, the global demand of steel has been falling since 2015. This has made major global steel producers to push steel products into Indian market, thus raising to major concerns: 1. A surge in steel imports, and 2. Interest of domestic steel industry hit hard. The Indian steel industry, due to higher borrowings, higher raw material costs, with lower productivity, is at a comparative disadvantage. The GOI took the following measures to curb the surging steel imports and make domestic production sustainable. 1. Custom duty increased by up to 5% on certain primary iron and steel products. 2. Anti-dumping duty imposed on industrial-grade steel imports from China, Malaysia and Korea, ranging from US $316 per ton. Similar measures were taken by 40 other countries in the world. 3. Provisional safeguard custom duty of 20% imposed on hot-rolled flat products of non-alloy and other alloy steel in coils. 4. Minimum import price imposed on a number of steel products for a 6-month period. 5. Reduced export duty on iron ore to 10% for select steel, from 30%. As per the government, any further custom increase will impact the downstream industries as steel is used as an input in different industries. This makes it clear that the Indian steel industry needs to get more competitive via cutting its borrowings and raw material costs together with enhancing productivity. Aluminium Industry. Though India has been a major player in the global aluminium industry, in past few years it has been facing certain challenges due to global reasons. India is second largest producer after China and third largest consumer after China of aluminium in the world. Today, India produces around 4.5 metric tons, China 22 metric tons, and consumes 3.8 metric tons, China 23 metric tons, USA 5.5 metric tons. The challenges Indian aluminium industry is faced with may be summed up as given below. 1. World aluminium prices have dropped by 41% between 2011 and 2015. During this period in India, imports, as a proportion of total demand, sales plus imports, have increased substantially from around 40% to 57%. 2. Huge capacity has been created in China and world growth has slowed down. 3. The cost of production for India is presently higher than international prices. India's cost of production of aluminium has been increasing gradually while world costs remain static. 4. The Indian capacity has increased substantially since 2015 to 16, but its utilization has not improved. Utilization was nearly 100% up to 2013 to 14 and has declined to 50% by late 2018. This has happened due to fall in global prices. 5. The Indian aluminium industry will continue to face difficulty unless world prices increase, because in the short run, it is virtually impossible to reduce the cost of production. Global aluminium prices, like other metal prices, are cyclical, and it is difficult to forecast when they will begin to move upwards. But the trend is expected to change when world industrial growth improves. India is avoiding custom duty to reduce import of aluminium because it may erode the competitiveness of downstream sectors like power, transport, and construction. Apparel and footwear sectors. Since the Industrial Revolution, no country has become a major economy without becoming an industrial power. In case of India, industrial expansion had been not only stunted but largely capital-intensive, job creation being not compatible to investments. Sitting on the cusp of demographic dividend, India needs to generate jobs that are formal, productive, and compatible to investment. Besides, the economy has to search for alternatives for promoting growth, exports, and broader social transformation. In this case, two sectors, apparel and leather and footwear, presently look eminently suitable candidates. Growth and exports. Almost every high-growth economies in post-war history in East Asia has been associated with rapid expansion in clothing and footwear exports in the early stages. In the successful East Asian economies, where GDP growth booms averaged between 7 to 10%, growth in the exports of these two sectors was exceptional. The average annual growth of apparel exports was over 20%, with some close to 50%, and that of leather and footwear averaged more than 25%. In its takeoff phase of growth, India has underperformed relative to the East Asian competitors. The Indian underperformance has been particularly marked in the leather sector. Social transformation through women empowerment. These industries create high number of jobs, especially for women. Apparel sector is the most labor-intensive, followed by footwear. Apparels are 80-fold more labor-intensive than auto industry and 240-fold more jobs creating than steel industry. The comparable numbers for leather goods are 33-fold and 100-fold, respectively. As per the World Bank's employment elasticities, it is estimated that rapid export growth in these sectors could generate about 5 lakh additional direct jobs every year. Enhanced opportunity for women implies that these sectors could be vehicles for social transformation. In Bangladesh, female education, total fertility rates, and women's labor force participation moved positively due to the expansion of the apparel sector. A historic opportunity. India has an opportunity to promote the exports from these sectors as Chinese market shares are either stabilizing or falling. The space vacated by China is fast being taken over by Bangladesh and Vietnam in case of apparels, Vietnam and Indonesia in case of leather and footwear. At present, Indian apparel and leather firms are relocating to Bangladesh, Vietnam, Myanmar, and even Ethiopia. The window of opportunity is narrowing and India needs to act fast if it is to regain competitiveness and market share in these sectors. Challenges. These sectors face a set of common challenges: logistics, labor regulations, the policies related to tax and tariff, and disadvantages emanating from the international trading environment compared to the competitors. In addition, the leather and footwear sector faces the specific challenge relating to policies that prevent converting its comparative advantage, abundance of cattle, into export opportunities. India still has potential comparative advantage in terms of cheaper and abundant labor, but these are nullified by other factors. A brief idea about the challenges are as given below. 1. Logistics. On logistics, India is handicapped relative to competitors in a number of ways. The costs and time involved in getting goods from factory to destination are higher. 2. Labor regulations. Labor cost is one advantage to India, but it is also not working in its favor. The problems are well known. Regulations on minimum overtime pay. The Minimum Wages Act 1948 mandates payment of overtime wages at twice the rate of ordinary rates. lack of flexibility in part-time work, onerous mandatory contributions, employees' funds that become de facto taxes for low-paid workers in small firms that results in a 45% lower disposable salary due to their contributions to the Employee Provident Fund Organization, EPFO, Employee Pension Scheme, EPAs, Labor Welfare Fund, LWF, Employees Deposit Linked Insurance Scheme, EDLI, and Employee State Insurance, ESI, etc. Apparel and leather firms in India are smaller compared to firms in, say, China, Bangladesh, and Vietnam. An estimated 78% of firms in India employ less than 50 workers, with 10% employing more than 500. In China, the comparable numbers are about 15% and 28% respectively. 3. Tax and tariff policies. Tax and tariff policies create distortions, impeding India's export competitiveness. In the case of apparels, there are two sets of policies, both of which impede competitiveness in man-made fibers and favor instead cotton-based exports. This is serious because internationally, world demand is shifting strongly towards man-made fibers. Similarly, while world's exports are shifting from leather to non-leather footwear, India imposes higher tax on the latter. 4. Discrimination in export markets. India's competitor exporting nations for apparels and leather and footwear enjoy better market access by way of zero or at least lower tariffs in the two major importing markets, namely the USA and EU. European Union. Bangladesh's exports enter the EU mostly duty-free, former being a less developed country, while Indian exports of apparels face average tariffs of 9.1%. Vietnam could also attract zero tariffs once the EU-Vietnam FTA, Free Trade Agreement, comes into effect. In the US, India faces tariff of 11.4%. Ethiopia, which is an emerging new competitor in apparels and leather, enjoys duty-free access in US, EU and Canada. Indian leather exports also face high tariffs in partner country markets in exports of leather goods and non-leather footwear, with considerable added disadvantage in Japan. 5. Specific challenge in leather and footwear sectors. The sectors use raw hides and skins of a number of animals like cattle, buffalo, goat, sheep and other smaller animals. Amongst these, leather made from cattle hides has greater global demand, owing to its strength, durability, and superior quality. Cattle-based global exports dominate buffalo-based exports by a factor of 8 to 9. However, despite having a large cattle population, India's share of global cattle population and exports of cattle hides is low and declining. This trend can be attributed to the limited availability of cattle for slaughter in India, thereby leading to loss of a potential comparative advantage due to underutilization of the abundantly available natural resource. Several measures of the package approved by the government for textiles and apparels in June 2016 are aimed at addressing the challenges described above. Similar provisions are needed for the leather exporters. Immediate actions are needed in the areas of reforming labor laws, tax rationalization, GST will be helpful, employees' contributions to security schemes and articulating new FTAs, etc. FDI policy measures. Foreign direct investment, FDI, is an important driver of economic growth which helps in sustaining high growth rate, increasing productivity, a major source of non-debt financial resources, and employment generation. A favorable policy regime and sound business environment facilitate FDI flows. The government has taken various reforms to liberalizing and simplifying the FDI policy to provide ease of doing business climate in the country that will also lead to larger FDI inflows. A number of sectors have been liberalized, including defense, construction, broadcasting, civil aviation, plantation, trading, private sector banking, satellite establishment and operation and credit information companies. By early 2017, the government had taken the following policy steps to promote FDI in the economy. 1. Up to 49% FDI permitted in insurance and pension funds, 26% under automatic route and defense sector. 2. 100% FDI permitted in manufacturing of medical devices, the white label ATM, and railway infrastructure. 3. 100% FDI allowed in marketing of food products produced and manufactured in India, Union Budget 2016-17. 4. To undertake important banking sector reforms and public listing of general insurance companies undertake significant changes in FDI policy. Union Budget 2016-17. 5. Reforms in FDI policy in the areas of insurance and pension, asset reconstruction companies, stock exchanges, Union Budget 2016-17. 6. A new policy for management of the PSUs, including strategic disinvestment. This is supposed to have liberal provisions for the FDI, Union Budget 2019-20. As per the Economic Survey 2019-20, government is playing a proactive role in investment promotion through a liberal FDI policy. In attracting FDI, India has been able to better its performance with every passing year. During 2019 to 2020, up to September, total FDI equity inflows were $22.66 billion during corresponding period of 2018 to 2019. Out of FDI equity inflows of $26 and 10 cents, $26.10 billion during 2019 to 2020, up to September, nearly 80% came mainly from Singapore, Mauritius, Netherlands, USA and Japan. Ease of doing business. Doing Business Report, an annual publication, since 2004, of the World Bank Group ranks the countries of the world on the basis of their regulations that enhance business activity and those that constrain it. Popularly known as Ease of Doing Business Report, it measures the state of business regulation in countries on the following 12 parameters. However, in ranking, the last two parameters in the list below are not included. 1. Starting a business. 2. Dealing with construction permits. 3. Getting electricity. 4. Registering property. 5. Getting credit. 6. Protecting minority investors. 7. Paying taxes. 8. Trading across borders. 9. Enforcing contracts. 10. Resolving insolvency. And 11. Employing workers. And 12. Contracting with governments. For ranking countries, the report analyzes regulation that encourages efficiency and supports freedom to do business through field surveys and interviews with corporate lawyers and company executives, asking following 3 questions about government. 1. When do governments change regulation with a view to developing their private sector? 2. What are the characteristics of reformist governments? 3. What are the effects of regulatory change on different aspects of economic or investment activity? In the Doing Business 2020 report, India has been ranked 63rd among the 190 countries. This shows a jump of 14 ranks over the preceding report. Though only 2 cities, Delhi and Mumbai, are included in the report, it speaks enough about the business regulatory environment in the country. The report has recognized India as one of the 10 economies that have improved the most, from 142nd in 2014 to 63rd in 2019. Though India has been able to improve its rank in 7 out of 10 parameters, it needs to work on other indicators to improve its ranking further to be ranked within the top 50 economies. India continues to trail in parameters such as ease of starting business, registering property, paying taxes, and enforcing contracts. To get included among the top 30 countries, as the government has targeted under its Output Outcome Framework document, India requires a nuts and bolts approach of feedback loops, monitoring and continuous adjustment. Make in India. Make in India was launched in September 2014 by the GOI to encourage multinational as well as domestic companies to manufacture their products in India. The initiative is set to boost entrepreneurship, not only in manufacturing but in relevant infrastructure and service sectors as well. Major features of the initiative are as given below. Vision: attracting both capital and technological investment in India, enabling it to become the top global FDI, surpassing even China and the United States. Objective: to focus on job creation and skill enhancement in 25 key sectors of the economy, including automobiles, aviation, biotechnology, defense manufacturing, electrical machinery, food processing, oil and gas, and pharmaceuticals, among others. Logo is inspired from Ashoka Chakra, is a striding line made of cogs, symbolizing manufacturing, strength, and national pride. The initiative also aims at imposing high-quality standards and the dimensions of sustainability. Key policies to be followed are ease of doing business, getting away with archaic laws, 100 smart cities, disinvestment of the PSUs, skills and jobs for the youth, etc. Major challenges to the initiatives include creating a healthy business environment, removal of unfavorable factors, more focus on Indians' MSMEs, lack of world-class research and development, R&D, and comparisons with China's Made in China campaign. The initiative is based on 4 pillars: new processes, new infrastructure, new sectors, and new mindset. The major steps taken by the government in this regard are as summed up below. 1. An interactive portal for dissemination of information and interaction with investors has been created with the objective of generating awareness about the investment opportunities and prospects of the country, to promote India as a preferred investment destination in markets overseas and to increase Indian share of global FDI. 2. Invest India set up as the National Investment Promotion and Facilitation Agency. 3. With the objective of promoting investment in the country, a full-fledged investment facilitation cell has been set up under the Make in India initiative, primarily to support all investment queries as well as to handhold and liaise with various agencies on behalf of potential investors. 4. As envisaged by the National Manufacturing Policy 2011. Make in India seeks to enable the sector to contribute 25% to the GDP and create 100 million additional jobs by 2022. 5. A number of steps to enhance the skills of workers or the unemployed in India in order to improve their employability. 6. In order to tap the creative potential and boost entrepreneurship in India, the Startup India and Stand Up India campaign has been announced. 7. An innovation promotion platform called AIM, Atal Innovation Mission, and a techno-financial incubation and facilitation program called SETU, self-employment and talent utilization, are being implemented to encourage innovation and startups in India. 8. For supporting the financial needs of the small and medium enterprise sector and promote startups and entrepreneurship, various steps taken through Make in India. The India Aspiration Fund has also been set up under the SIDBI for venture capital financing to the MSME sector. B. SIDBI Make in India Loan for Small Enterprises, SMILE, launched to offer quasi-equity and term-based short-term loans to Indian SMEs on liberal terms. C. A Micro-Units Development Refinance Agency. Mudra, bank set up to provide development and refinance to commercial banks or NBFCs or cooperative banks for loans given to microunits. Mudra follow a credit plus approach by also providing several other services such as financial literacy and addressing skill gaps, information gaps, etc. During 2019 to 2020, government took the following major steps to attract more investment in manufacturing sector and boost the Make in India campaign. Income tax rate cut down to 15%, effective rate to be 17.01% inclusive of surcharge and cess for companies incorporated on or after 1st October 2019 to attract investment in manufacturing and boost Make in India. The effective tax rate for these companies shall be 17.01%. Minimum alternate tax has also been dropped for such companies. To provide level playing field, custom duty was increased on certain items such as specified electrical or electronic or telecom equipment and hardware, polyvinyl chloride, specified articles of nylon, etc. The introduction of GST has integrated India into a single common market by breaking barriers to interstate trade and commerce. By eliminating cascading of taxes and reducing transaction costs, it has enhanced ease of doing business and has provided an impetus to Make in India campaign. Assemble in India for the world, the current environment, in the wake of Sino-US trade tension and rising protectionism across the world, presents India an unprecedented opportunity to chart a China-like, labor-intensive, export trajectory and thereby create unparalleled job opportunities. For this, India need to integrate Assemble in India for the world into Make in India. By doing so, there is a possibility for India to raise its export market share in the world exports to about 3.5% by 2025 and 6% by 2030. Besides, this will create 4 crore well-paid jobs by 2025 and 8 crores by 2030. Other than suggesting to make India's trade policy as an enabler, the survey has articulated a clear-headed strategy to grab this opportunity. A boost to Make in India may not only enhance exports, but replace imports of products in which India has sufficient scope for expansion in domestic manufacturing. Startup India. The Startup India scheme was launched by the GOI in January 2016 with the slogan, Startup India and Stand Up India. The mission or scheme aims to build a strong ecosystem for nurturing innovation, driving sustainable economic growth, and generating large-scale employment opportunities. Apart from the technology sector, the startup movement will extend to a wide array of other sectors including agriculture, manufacturing, healthcare, and education. And from existing Tier 1 cities will extend to Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities including semi-urban and rural areas. The proposed action plan, Economic Survey 2015-16, for the firms is as given below, creating a compliance regime based on self-certification to reduce the regulatory burden and keep compliance cost low. Setting up Startup India Hub to create a single point of contact for the entire startup ecosystem and enable knowledge exchange and access to funding. Rolling out of mobile app and portal. To serve as the single platform for startups to interact with government and regulatory institutions and various stakeholders. Relaxed norms of public procurement. Legal support and fast tracking of patent examination at lower costs to promote awareness of IPR, intellectual property rights. Faster and easier exit norms. Providing funding support through a fund of funds with a corpus of 10,000 crore rupees. Credit Guarantee Fund to catalyze entrepreneurship. Tax exemption on capital gains, income tax exemption for 3 years. Launch of AIM, Atal Innovation Mission, with the SETU, self-employment and talent utilization program to serve as a platform for promotion of world-class innovation hubs, startup businesses, and other self-employment activities, particularly in technology-driven areas. Building innovation centers at national institutes to propel successful innovation through augmentation of incubation and R&D efforts. Setting up of 7 new research parks, modeled on the research park at IIT Madras. Promoting startups in the biotechnology sector. Launching of innovation-focused programs for students to foster a culture of innovation in the field of science and technology. To encourage the startups, the government has taken several new initiatives in the area, acknowledging the need to reduce the regulatory burden. Self-certification allowed under 3 labor laws and 6 environment laws. Startup India Hub has been developed as a single point of contact for them, enabling them to exchange knowledge and access fund. A fund of funds for startups, FFS, with a corpus of 10,000 crores rupees has been created, which is being managed by SIDBI. Several steps have also been taken to promote industry-academia partnership and incubation. With an aim to foster and facilitate bioentrepreneurship, bioclusters, bioincubators, technology transfer offices, TTOs, and BioConnect, offices are being established in research institutes and universities across India. Seed fund and equity funding support is also provided to biotech startups under the initiative. The policy steps taken by the government have left a very positive impact on innovation and entrepreneurship in the country. There is a need of encouraging startups at the district level to have an inclusive effect of income generation felt at grassroots level. The present situation, based on the database of the World Bank and the Ministry of Corporate Affairs of startups in the country, is as given below. Today, India ranks 3rd in number of new firms in the world, the number increasing from 70,000 in 2014 to 1,24,000 in 2018. There were 27,084 startups recognized across 551 districts by 8th January 2020, 55% in Tier I cities, 45% in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities, with 43% having at least one woman director. Birth of new firms is very heterogeneous across the districts and sectors. Moreover, it is dispersed and not restricted to just a few cities. Informal sector. While new firms grew with an annual growth rate of 3.8% between 2006 to 2014, for the period 2014 to 2018 the growth rate has been 12.2%. Reflecting India's new economic structure, i.e. comparative advantage in the services sector, new firm creation in services is significantly higher than that in manufacturing, infrastructure, or agriculture. A 10% increase in registration of new firms in a district yields a 1.8% increase in GDP, gross district domestic product, being maximal in manufacturing and services sectors. Entrepreneurship is fostered by the factors like literacy, education, quality of physical infrastructure, and ease of doing business, like flexible labor laws. Startups drive economic growth, wealth creation, create employment, and foster a culture of innovation which will turn the youths from job seekers to job givers, and thus can emerge as the tool to tap the demographic dividend. Indian infrastructure. An introduction. Infrastructure is the lifeline of an economy as protein is the lifeline of the human body. Whichever sector be the prime moving force of an economy, i.e., primary, secondary or tertiary, suitable level of infrastructure presence is a prerequisite for growth and development. This is why the Government of India has always given priority to the developmental aspects of the sector. but the level of preparedness and performance had been always less than required by the economy. Which sector are called the infrastructure? Basically, the goods and services usually requiring higher investment, considered essential for the proper functioning of an economy, is called the infrastructure of an economy. Such sectors might be as many as required by a particular economy, such as power, transportation, communication, water supply, sewerage, housing, urban amenities, etc. There are three sectors which are considered as the infrastructure universally around the world, namely power, transportation, and communication. Since infrastructure benefits the whole economy, it has been often argued by the economists that the sector should be funded by the government by means of taxation, partly not wholly. Indian infrastructure sector is clearly overstrained and has suffered from underinvestment in the post-reforms period. Infrastructure bottlenecks are always constrained in achieving a higher growth for the economy. India needs massive investment, both from the public and private sectors, to overcome infrastructure bottlenecks. Investments by the public and private sectors are not alternatives, but complementary to each other, as the required investment is very high. Public investment in the sector depends upon the ability to raise resources, capital, in the public sector, and this in turn depends upon the ability to collect the user charges from the consumers. To make this happen, following three factors are extremely important. 1. Reform of the power sector. 2. Introduction of road user charges, either directly via tolls or indirectly via a cess on petrol diesel. And 3. Rationalization of railway fares. Experts have suggested for expanding public investment in the sector, supplemented duly by a vigorous effort of attracting private investment, domestic as well as foreign. Creating the conducive environment to attract private investment in infrastructure should include 1. Simplification and transparency in the clearance procedures. 2. Unbundling an infrastructure project so that the private sector may go for only those unbundled segment of the project whose they are able to bear. And 3. Providing credible and independent regulatory framework so that the private players get fair treatment. Official ideology. Putting in place the quality and efficient infrastructure services is essential to realize the full potential of the growth impulses surging through the Indian economy. There is now a widespread consensus, clearly accepted by the Planning Commission, that exclusive dependence on the government for the provision of all infrastructure services introduces difficulties concerning adequate scale of investment, technical efficiency, proper enforcement of user charges, and competitive market structure. At the same time, complete reliance on private production, particularly without appropriate regulation, is also not likely to produce optimal outcomes. India, while stepping up public investment in infrastructure, has been actively engaged in finding the appropriate policy framework, which gives the private sector adequate confidence and incentives to invest on a massive scale, but simultaneously preserves adequate checks and balances through transparency, competition, and regulation. The approach towards infrastructure has gone for a transformational change since the new policy think tank Niti Aayog came into being. The 7-year strategy framework, titled as Strategy for New India at 75, document of the Niti has devoted a full section on it, out of its 4 sections. The document believes that infrastructure is the physical foundations of growth and development which are crucial to enhancing the competitiveness of Indian businesses, as also ensuring the citizens' ease of living. The sector needs an unprecedented scale of investment. That is why the government is exploring all possible models of resource mobilization. The hybrid annuity model, HAM, of the public-private partnership, PPP, mode is expected to emerge an effective tool in this regard. Uddai Scheme. Without improving the performance of the electricity distribution companies, DISCOMs, of the state government's efforts towards 100% village electrification, 24x7 power supply, and clean energy cannot bear fruit. Power outages also adversely affect national priorities like Make in India and Digital India. In addition, default on bank loans by financially stressed DISCOMs has the potential of seriously impacting the banking sector and the economy at large. For financial and operational turnaround of DISCOMs, and to ensure a sustainable permanent solution to the problem, the Ujjwal Discom Assurance Yojana was launched by the GOI in November 2015. The scheme also aims to reduce interest burden of the DISCOMs, cost of power, and their AT&C, aggregate transmission and technical losses. Due to legacy issues, DISCOMs are trapped in a vicious cycle with operational losses being funded by debt. Outstanding debt of DISCOMs were 4.3 lakh rupees crore by 2014 to 15, with interest rates up to 14, 15% and AT&C losses as high as 22%. The scheme assures the rise of vibrant and efficient DISCOMs through a permanent resolution of past as well as potential future issues of the sector. It empowers DISCOMs with the opportunity to break even in the next 2 to 3 years. This is to take place through 4 initiatives: 1. Improving operational efficiencies, 2. Reduction of cost of power, 3. Reduction in interest cost, and 4. Enforcing financial discipline. Operational efficiency to be improved via steps such as compulsory smart metering, upgradation of transformers, meters, etc. Energy efficiency via steps like efficient LED bulbs, agricultural pumps, fans and air conditioners, etc. to reduce the average AT&C loss from around 22% to 15% and eliminate the gap between ARR, average revenue realized, and ACS, average cost of supply, by 2018 to 19. Reduction in cost of power would be achieved through measures such as increased supply of cheaper domestic coal, coal linkage rationalization, liberal coal swaps from inefficient to efficient plants, coal price rationalization based on GCV, gross calorific value, supply of washed and crushed coal, and faster completion of transmission lines. NTPC alone is expected to save 0.35 rupees unit through higher supply of domestic coal and rationalization and swapping of coal, which will be passed on to DISCOMs. The salient features of the scheme are as given below. States shall take over 75% of the Discom debt, 50% in 2015 to 16 and 25% in 2016 to 17. This will reduce the interest cost to 8 to 9% from as high as 14 to 15%. GOI will not include the debt taken over by the states in the calculation of fiscal deficit of the states in the financial years 2015 to 16 and 2016 to 17. States will issue non-SLR including SDL, State Development Loan, bonds in the market or directly to the respective banks and financial institutions, FIs. Discom debt not taken over by the state shall be converted by the banks and FIs into loans or bonds with interest rate not more than the bank's base rate plus 0.1%. Alternately, this debt may be fully or partly issued by the Discom as state-guaranteed Discom bonds at the prevailing market rates, which shall be equal to or less than bank base rate plus 0.1%. States to take over the future losses of DISCOMs in a graded manner. States accepting Uddai and performing as per operational milestones will be given additional or priority funding through Deen Dayal Upadhyaya Gram Jyoti Yojana, DDG, Integrated Power Development Scheme, IPDS, Power Sector Development Fund, PSDF, or other such schemes of Ministry of Power and Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. States not meeting operational milestones will be liable to forfeit their claim on IPDS and DDG grants. Such states shall also be supported with additional coal at notified prices in case of availability through higher capacity utilization, low-cost power from NTPC, and other central PSUs. Uddai is optional for all states. However, states are encouraged to take the benefit at the earliest as benefits are dependent on the performance. By March 2019, most of the states or UTs had joined the scheme. Basically, financial liabilities of DISCOMs are the contingent liabilities of the respective states and need to be recognized as such. Debt of DISCOMs is de facto borrowing of states, which is not counted in de jure borrowing. However, credit rating agencies and multilateral agencies are conscious of this de facto debt in their appraisals. The 14th Finance Commission also had similar observations. Similarly, the new scheme, DDG, Deen Dayal Upadhyaya Gram Jyoti Yojana, was launched to promote rural electrification. The budgetary support for continuation of the RGGVY, Rajiv Gandhi Gramin Vidyatikran, in 12th and 13th plans, has also been carried forward to the new scheme. Uddai accelerates the process of reform across the entire power sector and will ensure that power is accessible, affordable, and available for all. Uddai truly heralds the rise of a powerful India. AT&C losses. Due to lack of adequate investment on transmission and distribution (T&D) works, the T&D losses have been consistently on the higher side and reached to the level of 32.86% in the year 2001. The reduction of these losses was essential to bring economic viability to the state utilities, SEBs. As the T&D loss was not able to capture all the losses in the network, concept of aggregate technical and commercial AT&C loss was introduced. AT&C loss captures technical as well as commercial losses in the network and is a true indicator of total losses in the system. High technical losses in the system are primarily due to inadequate investments over the years for system improvement works, which has resulted in unplanned extensions of the distribution lines, overloading of the system elements like transformers and conductors, and lack of adequate reactive power support. The commercial losses are mainly due to 1. Low metering efficiency, 2. Theft, and 3. Pilferages. This may be eliminated by improving metering efficiency, proper energy accounting and auditing, and improved billing and collection efficiency. Fixing of accountability of the personnel or feeder managers may help considerably in reduction of AT&C loss. Aimed mainly at bringing down the AT&C of the state discoms, Uddai is the fourth scheme sponsored by the government, the APRDP, Accelerated Power Development and Reform Program, in 2001, restructured APRDP in 2008, and the IPDS, Integrated Power Development Scheme, in 2014 which subsumed the RAPRDP. Uddai's performance, as per the government, the performance of the scheme cannot be called very positive. Of the 28 states that implemented it, 10 have shown either reduced losses or profits in 2019 to 2020, April to December. Also, even as most states registered an improvement in reducing the ACSARR gap and in bringing down AT&C losses, they are way behind in achieving the targets as per the Uddai schedule, similar to the earlier attempts at it. Meanwhile, there is proposal of replacing it with a new scheme. The new scheme is supposed to keep discoms under it once they meet the deficit targets, or they will have to switch over to other models such as involving the private sector, like the franchise or PPP models. The centre is also likely to back up the new scheme by providing some grant support, which it did not do in Uddai. Railways. Indian Railways, IR, is faced with a number of challenges. For speedy capacity creation, IR recognizes the importance of enhancing project execution capabilities. Considering the enormity of the resources required for planned investment in rail infrastructure, and given the limitation of public resources, efforts are on by IR to generate sufficient internal surplus and tap innovative methods of financing to meet these needs. The focus is on prioritizing investments in important areas like dedicated freight corridors, high-speed rail, high-capacity rolling stock, last-mile rail linkages and port connectivity, and attracting private and FDI investments to supplement available resources. Major initiatives taken by the GOI are as given below: various measures to improve passenger amenities, infrastructure and services, and initiatives under Make in India, Freight Initiative, Resource Mobilization Initiative, and Green Initiatives, etc. Mobile application for freight operations, Parichalan, has been introduced. IR is installing solar panels on rooftops of coaches for the train lighting system. Solar plants of 50 megawatts to come up on the rooftops of IR buildings. Diamond quadrilateral network of high-speed rail connecting major metros, Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata and Chennai to come up. High-speed train project. The feasibility report of the Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA, was approved by the GOI in December 2015. A new special purpose vehicle with 50% equity participation from the Ministry of Railways and 50% from the state governments of Maharashtra and Gujarat will be set up to implement the project. Major features of the project are as given below. Project completion cost is approximately 97,636 crore rupees, including price escalation, interest during construction and import duties. Average per kilometer cost of construction works out to be 140 crore rupees. To be completed in 7 years. Japan's ODA, Official Development Assistance, will be 79,165 crore rupees, 81% of project cost, for 50 years with 0.1% interest and a 15-year moratorium. Total length of the proposed corridor will be 508 kilometers between the Bandra-Kurla complex in Mumbai and Sabarmati or Ahmedabad in Gujarat to cover 12 stations with a maximum design speed of 350 kilometers per hour with a 320 kilometers per hour operating speed. Train 18, India's first engineless, semi-high-speed train, 160 kilometers per hour, the Train 18, rechristened Vande Bharat Express, was launched in February 2019. The train is equipped with the finest amenities, such as comfortable 180-degree rotational reclining chairs, mobile charging points, diffused lighting and reading lights, GPS passenger information service, CCTV cameras, talkback facility to connect with the driver in case of emergency, sensor-controlled bathroom fitting for differently abled people and modular toilets with biodischarge vacuum systems. Designed and built by Integral Coach Factory, Chennai, under the Make in India initiative, it is estimated to cost 40% less than a similar train imported from Europe. Its successor called Train 20 is also being developed, which will replace the existing long-distance trains of today in the coming years. Roads. With about 59.64 lakh kilometers of road network comprising national highways, state highways, and other roads, India has the second largest road network in the world. The NH in the country cover a total length of 1.32 lakh kilometers and carry about 40% of the road traffic. Financing of the Nhdp, a part of the fuel cess imposed on petrol and diesel, is allocated to the NHAI for funding the implementation of the Nhdp. The NHAI leverages the cess flow to borrow additional funds from the debt market. Till date, such borrowings have been limited to funds raised through 54EC, capital gains tax exemption, bonds, and the short-term overdraft facility. Government has also taken loans for financing projects under the Nhdp from the World Bank, US $1,605 million, and Japan Bank for International Cooperation, 32,060 million yen, which are passed on to the NHAI partly in the form of grants and partly as loan. The NHAI has also availed a direct loan of $180 million from the ADB for the Surat-Mener Expressway project. Special Accelerated Road Development Program for Northeast Region, SARDEEP, aims at improving road connectivity to state capitals, district headquarters, and remote places of the Northeast region. Development of roads in left-wing extremism, LWE, affected areas in the states of Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Odisha, and Uttar Pradesh is continuing. Prime Minister's Reconstruction Plan, PMRP, for Jammu and Kashmir, launched in November 2004. In the past few years, many new initiatives were taken by the GOI, Bharatmala program to connect non-major ports, backward areas, religious, tourist places connectivity program, Setugratam Pariyojana to construct about 1,500 major bridges, and the district headquarter connectivity scheme for development of about 9,000 kilometers newly declared NHs. Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, PMGSY, launched to provide single all-weather road connectivity to eligible unconnected habitations having population of 500 persons and above in plain areas and 250 persons and above in hill states, tribal, Schedule V, areas, desert, as identified in the Desert Development Program, areas, and LW affected districts as identified by the Ministry of Home Affairs. Rural roads has also been identified as one of the 6 components of Bharat Nirman, which has the goal of providing all-weather road connectivity to all villages with a population of 1,500 in the case of hilly or tribal areas. Bharatmala Pariyojana, launched in 2015-16, this is a new umbrella program for the highways sector that focuses on optimizing efficiency of freight and passenger movement across the country. It aims at bridging critical infrastructure gaps through effective interventions like development of economic corridors, inter-corridors and feeder routes, national corridor efficiency improvement, border and international connectivity roads, coastal and port connectivity roads, and greenfield expressways. The objective of the program is to achieve optimal resource allocation for a holistic highway development. Civil aviation. Airport infrastructure development continues to be a matter of concern. Upgradation of many airports, including construction of new terminals, upgradation in 18 non-metro airports, for improving air navigation services. The Airport Authority of India, AI, installing the new ATS automation system. In order to address issues concerning viability of the civil aviation sector, particularly the airline industry, a working group was constituted on 12 December 2011 under the chairmanship of the Secretary Civil Aviation. Their major recommendations were: 1. State governments should rationalize the value-added tax, VAT, on aviation turbine fuel, ATF. 2. Foreign airlines be permitted to invest in domestic airlines undertakings, 3. Direct import of ATF by airlines for their own consumption be allowed. 4. Airlines should be asked to prepare their turnaround plans. 5. Fare structure should be reviewed by airlines to cover the cost of their operations. 6. An economic regulatory framework suggested with regard to excessive or predatory pricing. Maritime Agenda 2010-20. The objective of the Maritime Agenda 2010-20 is not only creating more capacity, but setting up ports on a par with the best international ports in terms of performance. 1. A target of 3,130 metric tons port capacity has been set for the year 2020. More than 50% of this capacity is to be created in the non-major ports, as the traffic handled by these ports is expected to increase to 1,280 metric tons. 2. This enlarged scale of operation is expected to reduce transaction costs considerably and make Indian ports globally competitive. 3. Proposed investment in major and non-major ports by 2020 is expected to be around 296,000 crore rupees. 4. Most of the investment to come from the private sector, including FDI, up to 100% under the automatic route is permitted for construction and maintenance of ports, and private sector to fund most of the projects through PPP or on build-operate-transfer, BOT, or build-operate-on-transfer, BOT, basis. 5. Private sector participation will not only increase investment in the port's infrastructure, it is expected to improve operations of the ports through the induction of the latest technology and better management practices. 6. Public funds will be mainly deployed for common use infrastructure facilities like deepening of port channels, rail and road connectivity from ports to hinterland, etc. Smart Cities. The GOI has launched the Smart Cities Mission, SCM, with the collaboration of states and UTs for urban development. The purpose of the mission is to drive economic growth and improve the quality of life of people by enabling local area development and harnessing technology, especially technology that leads to smart outcomes. The mission targets promoting cities that provide core infrastructure and give a decent quality of life to its citizens, a clean and sustainable environment and application of smart solutions. The focus is on sustainable and inclusive development, and the idea is to look at compact areas and create a replicable model which will act like a lighthouse to other aspiring cities. The smart city includes the following core infrastructure development: adequate water supply, assured electricity supply, sanitation, including solid waste management, efficient urban mobility and public transport, affordable housing, especially for the poor, robust IT connectivity and digitalization, good governance, especially e-governance and citizen participation, sustainable environment, safety and security of citizens, particularly women, children and the elderly, and health and education. Strategy. The strategic components of area-based development in the mission are city improvement, retrofitting, city renewal, redevelopment, city extension, greenfield development, and a pan-city initiative in which smart solutions are applied. Retrofitting will introduce planning in an existing built-up area to achieve smart city objectives, along with other objectives, to make the existing area more efficient and livable. In retrofitting, an area consisting of more than 500 acres will be identified by the city in consultation with citizens. Redevelopment will effect a replacement of the existing built-up environment and enable co-creation of a new layout with enhanced infrastructure using mixed land use and increased density. Redevelopment envisages an area of more than 50 acres, identified by urban local bodies, ULBs, in consultation with citizens. Greenfield development will introduce most of the smart solutions in a previously vacant area, more than 250 acres, using innovative planning, plan financing and plan implementation tools, e.g. land pooling or land reconstitution, with provision for affordable housing, especially for the poor. Greenfield development is required around cities in order to address the needs of the expanding population. Finance, the mission will cover 100 cities, which have been distributed among the states and UTs on the basis of equitable criteria. The distribution of smart cities will be reviewed after 2 years of the implementation of the mission. The Smart City Mission will be operated as a centrally sponsored scheme, CSS, and the central government proposes to give it financial support to the extent of 48,000 crore rupees over 5 years, i.e. on an average 100 crore rupees per city per year. An equal amount, on a matching basis, will have to be contributed by the state or ULB. Therefore, nearly 1 lakh crore of government or ULB funds will be available for smart cities development. In the first phase of implementation, 20 cities have been shortlisted to roll out the program. The migration from the rural areas to the cities is increasing with a higher pace. A new middle class is emerging, which has aspirations of better living standards. With all these challenges to the successful implementation of the mission, the center of attention is the citizen. In other words, a smart city will work towards ensuring the best for all people, regardless of social status, age, income levels, and gender, only when citizens will actively participate in governance and reforms. Smart Cities Mission requires involvement of smart people in the process of making decisions on deploying smart solutions, implementing reforms, doing more with less, maintaining oversight during implementation and designing post-project structures in order to make the smart city developments sustainable. As per the Economic Survey 2019-20, all 100 cities have incorporated special purpose vehicles, SPVs, city-level advisory forums, CLAFs, and appointed project management consultants, PMCs. Since the launch of the mission, 5,151 projects worth more than 2 lakh rupees crores are at various stages of implementation in the 100 cities. At present, 1,290 projects, over 25% of all projects, have been completed and are operational. Other urban infrastructure, with increasing urbanization, opportunities as well as challenges related to urban infrastructure are also increasing. In this context, up to early 2016, the government has taken various new initiatives to improve urban infrastructure. SBM, Swachh Bharat Mission, aims at making India free from open defecation and at achieving 100% scientific management of municipal solid waste in 41 statutory towns or cities in the country. The targets set for the mission, which have to be achieved by 2nd October 2019. Hriday, National Heritage City Development and Augmentation Yojana, aims at preserving and revitalizing the soul and unique character of heritage cities in India. In the first phase, it contains 12 cities: Ajmer, Amravati, Amritsar, Badami, Dwarka, Mathura, Puri, Varanasi, Velankani, Kachipuram, Gaya and Warangal. Amrit, Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation, aims at improving basic urban infrastructure in 500 cities or towns, which will be known as mission cities or towns. This is a centrally sponsored scheme, CSS, funded by GOI, states, and the local bodies. A number of other initiatives in the existing scheme of the policy framework have also been taken. Public transport through bus rapid transit systems, BRTS, approved for 11 cities under the Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewal Mission. Buses and metro rail projects to be equipped with its intelligent transport system. Private sector and urbanization. Proper urban planning becomes an important issue for India as it is urbanizing fast. Given the government push to the smart city scheme, it will be needful to tap the potential of every possible candidate in this regard. One of such candidate is the private sector. There are few examples where we find the sector able to develop praiseworthy townships, in certain areas beating the public sector also, though they have their own limitations too. Two such cases have been cited by the Economic Survey 2016-17, quoting case studies in this regard of two different time periods. 1. Gurgaon. It was in 2001 when Haryana government removed restrictions on the land acquisition process and empowered the Huda, Haryana Urban Development Authority, and allowed private builders to develop township on the erstwhile agricultural land. Here started the development of today's Gurgaon. Today the city is under the control of Huda, Municipal Corporation of Gurgaon, created in 2008, and the private builders. In Gurgaon, the private sector has stepped in to address many of the failings of the public sector, with mixed success. Corrected the failure of the public sector by creating private sewage, water, electricity, security and fire prevention. Rapid Metro in Gurgaon was built by DLF and Infrastructure Leasing and Financial Services Limited, IL&FS, with Huda providing the requisite land. Roads are of good quality. Shortfall in transport facilities is covered by the private modes of transport. Precisely speaking, private players have addressed most challenges, but they have been unable to provide services beyond their own property line as cooperation lacks amongst them and the authorities. The public authorities have had limited success in providing the city with large-scale infrastructure. The failures of the city are also well known. It suffered from lack of cohesive urban plan and its explosive growth has outpaced the planning efforts, like in any other Indian cities. Multiple layers of local and higher authorities, having greater power to extract rents, have increased the transaction costs for the private builders. Different private builders have to seek different political patronage, as otherwise none would manage to function. Competition among private suppliers has produced two failures. 1. Prices of water, electricity, sewage, and so forth are close to marginal cost, but average cost is far too high because of the failure to exploit economies of scale. 2. Competitive suppliers have produced negative externalities such as excess pollution with diesel fumes, overused common resources by dumping sewage waste, and groundwater dissipation leading to unsustainable level of water table. A vibrant civil society could have been able to put checks on such issues, but city being quite young, this is almost absent by now. 2. Jamshedpur. This is a private township and one of the best governed cities in India. Jamshedpur Utilities and Services Company Limited, JUSCO, a wholly owned subsidiary of Tata Steel, is responsible for provisioning of the basic services here. The township is widely regarded as having some of the best urban infrastructure in the country, and JUSCO is considered a model provider. It has a grown-up civil society which checks negative externalities of the urban expansion. The township was rated the second best in the country by Altmark Nielsen, the worldwide market research firm, on its Quality of Life Index in 2008, and in 2010 the city was ranked 7th of 441 cities and towns in India on sanitation and cleanliness by the Ministry of Urban Development. India needs to take few important lessons from the experience of the above-cited examples, so that the privately developed townships are ideal ones. 1. Private sector can develop quite a competitive urban centers. 2. Private sector will have to bear the burden of higher transaction costs if the city is managed by multiple authorities. Such costs would also be higher if initial cohesive development plan for the city is not put in place. Post-growth infrastructure development costs are much higher and at times prohibitive. 3. The active role of civil society can prevent excessive exploitation of resources and reduce the impact of negative externalities associated with rapid urbanization. We see this being present in the latter, but absent in the former. Ppp models. Managing adequate amount of fund for infrastructure development has been always a challenge for India. In reform era, the government evolved the idea of public-private partnership, PPP, for the sector aimed at attracting investments from the private sector, domestic as well as foreign. We see an encouraging contributions coming from the private sector in this regard also. But by 2013 to 14, the PPPs started getting unattractive for the private sector, primarily caused by the inbuilt flaws in the PPP models together with regulatory reasons. Although external reasons have been also there, slowdown in the country's economy due to recession among the Western economies. Various volumes of the economic survey together with the Kelkar Committee on the PPP have discussed about the various flaws in the existing model of the PPP, primarily used for the development of road projects in the country. In this backdrop, a better PPP model was announced by the government by early 2016, the Hybrid Annuity Model, HAM. A brief review of the major PPP models. Few of them are non-PPP models. 2 are given below. 1. BOTOL. The Build-Operate Transfer Toll was one of the earliest models of PPP. Other than sharing the project cost with the government, the private bidder was to build, maintain, operate the road and collect toll on the vehicular traffic. The bid was given to the private company offering to share maximum toll revenue to the government. The private party used to cover all risks related to land acquisition, construction, damage, inflation, cost overruns caused by delays and commercial. The government was responsible for only regulatory clearances. Due to inherent drawbacks, this model proved to be unsustainable for the private bidder. Undue delay in land acquisition due to litigation, cost overruns and uncertainties in traffic movement, commercial risk, made the road projects economically unviable. 2. Boat annuity. This was an improvement over the BOTOL model aimed at reversing the declining interest of the private companies towards road projects by mainly reducing the risk for the private players. Other than sharing the project cost, the private player was to build, maintain, and operate the road projects without any responsibility of collecting toll on the traffic. The private players were offered a fixed amount of money annually, called annuity, as compensation, the party bidding for the minimum annuity used to get the project. Toll collection was the responsibility of the government. This was different from the previous model, BOTOL. In one sense, private players were not having any commercial risk, traffic, but they remained very much exposed to other risks, land acquisition delays, inflation, cost overruns, construction. Even this model, over the time proved to be unviable for the private sector due to the leftover risks they were exposed to. 3. EPC model. The PPP model, which was seen to be a better way out to promote the infra projects, were visibly failing by the year 2010, and government was unable to attract the private players towards the road sector. It was in this backdrop that the Engineering Procurement Construction (EPC) model was announced. In this model, project cost was fully covered by the government. It means it was not a PPP model and was like normal contracts given to the bidders, together with majority of the risks, land acquisition, cost overruns due to delay, inflation and commercial. The private developers were supposed to design, construct, and hand over the road projects to the government, maintenance, operation, and toll collection being the government's responsibilities. Contract was given to the private player who offered to construct roads at the lowest cost or price guaranteeing the desired quality levels. It means the private player in this model was only exposed to the construction-related risks, which is a normal risk involved in any contract given by the government to the private party. EPC model could have been a temporary way out to develop road projects, as it was fully funded by the government. Reform era had aimed to attract investment from the private players by evolving a business model for the road sector. Need was to develop a new PPP model. In this backdrop, we see the government coming up with a new PPP model for the road projects, the hybrid annuity model. 4. HAM. Hybrid annuity model, HAM, is a mix of EPC and BOT-annuity models. In this model, the project cost is shared by the government and the private player in ratio of 40-60, respectively. The private player is responsible to construct and hand over the roads to the government, which will collect toll, if wishes, maintenance remaining the responsibility of the private player till the annuity period. Private player is paid a fixed sum of economic compensation, called annuity, similar to the BOT-annuity model of past, by the government for a fixed tenure, normally 15 years, though it is flexible. The private player which demands lowest annuity in bidding gets the contract. In this model, most of the major risks are covered by the government: land acquisition, clearances, operation, toll collection and commercial, while the risks related to inflation and cost overruns are shared in ratio of the project cost sharing. But the private sector is still exposed to the construction and maintenance risks. Delays from the government side in clearances and land acquisition have chances to enhance the degree of risks private players are exposed to. But overall, this is the best PPP model for the time, devoid of most of the flaws of past. Private sector has shown good response to this model. By early 2018, this model was notified by the government for other infra sectors too. 5. Swiss Challenge Model. Government of India, for the first time, announced the use of this model for redevelopment of railway stations in the country by late 2015. This is a very flexible method of giving contracts, i.e., public procurement, which can be used in PPP as well as non-PPP projects. In this, one bidder is asked by the government to submit the proposal for the project, which is put in public domain. Afterwards, several other bidders submit their proposals aimed at improving and beating the original first bidder. Finally, an improved bid is selected, called counter proposal. If the original bidder is not able to match the counter proposal, the project is awarded to the counter bidder. Government has made it an online method. Though the Government of India used this model for the first time, this has already been used by several states by now: Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, Punjab and Gujarat for roads and housing projects. In 2009, the Supreme Court approved the method for award of contracts. 6. PPP model for other sectors. Though the idea of PPP model was originally evolved for the infrastructure sector, in recent times, there have been proposals for its uses in other areas too, such as education, healthcare, and even agriculture. The model is getting popular support from the urban local bodies in the country, and it is believed that in the Smart Cities scheme it could play a very lucrative role. Recently, the Economic Survey 2016-17 suggested the government to create a new institution, as a PPP to compete with and complement existing institutions to procure stock and dispose pulses. 7. Ppp Model. Experts have suggested Public-Private People Partnership (PPP) model too for certain sector in the country. Though such a model has been in use since 2001 itself in agriculture sector to promote participatory irrigation development, in the Command Area Development Program of 1974, renamed as Command Area Development and Watershed Management Program in 2004, in which individual financial contributions come from the farmers, around 15% of the total cost, to develop field channels and drains. It is believed that in the area of developing, maintaining and protecting local public assets, this model could be highly effective. In future, the local bodies, urban as well as rural, may be using this model to develop social and economic infrastructure. Concerns of petroleum sector. In the absence of a global gas market for benchmarking domestic gas prices in India, various formulae have been suggested. Since October 2014, a formula based on producer and consumer markets is being used to arrive at domestic gas prices in India. It was expected that the formula would balance the interest of producers and consumers in the country. However, market-determined arm's-length pricing for domestic gas, with an effective regulator, to provide adequate incentive for investment and also ensure competitiveness and transparency remains the first best solution that merits consideration. It would reflect the appropriate gas price in relation to alternative fuels. In the medium term, being a large consumer, India may be able to be a price setter for gas prices in the region. Possible steps to address the concerns of the sector are as given below. Petroleum products and natural gas should be included under the Goods and Services Tax (GST), or at least its exclusion should not be indicated in the Constitution Amendment Bill. The cess collections could be used to support construction of a network of gas pipelines, which is of crucial importance for providing clean energy to deprived regions of the country. The progress is somewhat constrained at present by having been linked to revival of fertilizer units and development of small industries in areas along the gas highway projects. Alternatively, in order to promote the gas pipeline network, viability gap funding (VGF) may be provided for promoting pipeline assets creation and development of efficient markets. Impetus is required for construction of not only cross-country pipelines, but also city gas distribution. The present system of bidding by the Petroleum and Natural Gas Regulatory Board, PNGRB, is lopsided and long drawn out and needs to be reformed since it has constrained development of the gas network. Expansion of the PNG or CNG, compressed natural gas, network could help provide gas connections to rural areas. Rationalization of LPG subsidy is essential. It may be useful to cap subsidy to 10 LPG cylinders for each household, that being the maximum used for usual domestic cooking, while aligning taxes and duties on domestic and commercial LPG users. Import of liquefied natural gas, LNG, for use in the power industry is exempt from customs duty while LNG for all other uses attracts 5% customs duties. There should be no exemptions for any sector. In order to develop a cost-effective and revenue-neutral mechanism for swapping of gas across producing and consuming states for the national gas grid, it is important to make special tax provision for sale of natural gas under the Central Sales Tax Act 1956. Natural gas and LNG may be treated as declared goods to bring about tax parity with crude oil and make prices uniform across states. Meanwhile, India has entered into exploring the unconventional resources of energy such as the CBM, coal bed methane, and shale oil and gas. The estimated CBM resources are about 92 TCF, trillion cubic feet, of which only 9.9 TCF has so far been confirmed. Current production is about 1 million cubic meter per day. In the shale oil and gas areas, presently, the assessment process is going on in 50 blocks. Commercial production is yet to begin. Till early 2020, in order to encourage the participation of private sector in oil and natural gas sector, the major reform measures undertaken by the government were as given below: simplified fiscal and contractual terms, bidding of exploration blocks under Category 2 and 3 sedimentary basins without any production or revenue sharing to government, early monetization of discoveries by extending fiscal incentives, incentivizing gas production including marketing and pricing freedom, induction of latest technology and capital, more functional freedom to national oil companies for collaboration and private sector participation for production enhancement methods in nomination fields, etc. Renewable energy. India's renewable energy potential has been assessed, in the medium term, at 896,602 megawatts, which includes the potential from solar, 7,48,990 megawatts, wind, 1 lakh megawatts, small hydro, 20,000 megawatts, and biomass, 26,800 megawatts, power. Apart from grid power requirement, renewable energy sources are also being used for distributed generation, lighting, pumping and motive power requirement in remote and inaccessible areas. India is graduating from megawatts to gigawatts in the generation of clean renewable energy. The target from various renewable energy sources has been increased by the GOI to 175 gigawatts by the year 2022, solar and wind to contribute 100 gigawatts and 60 gigawatts, respectively. The major steps taken by the government to boost the sector in recent times are as given below. By early 2017, 1. Solar rooftop, grid-connected rooftop systems to come up by 2019 to 20 under the National Solar Mission, NSM. 2. Solar parks, 25 solar parks, and ultra-mega solar power projects, with an aggregate capacity of 20,000 megawatts to be set up in the next 5 years, from 2015 to 16 to 2019 to 20. 3. Solar projects under the NSM. In February 2015, the government announced to set up 15,000 megawatts of grid-connected solar PV power projects under the NSM by 2018 to 19. 4. Solar pumps, target of installing of 1 lakh solar pumps for irrigation and drinking water by 2016. 5. Solar cities, approval granted for 56 solar city projects under the Development of Solar Cities program. The Surya Mitra. This scheme was launched in May 2015 for creating 50,000 trained personnel within a period of 5 years, 2015 to 16 to 2019 to 20. In addition to the above, major policy initiatives taken by the government up to March 2016 include: 1. National Offshore Wind Energy Policy 2015 to exploit the vast 7,600 kilometers coastline for development of offshore wind energy in the Indian Exclusive Economic Zone, EEZ. 2. Inclusion of renewable energy in the priority sector and bank loans up to 15 crore rupees limit to borrowers categories for purposes like solar-based power generators, biomass-based power generators, windmills, microhydel plants and for non-conventional energy-based public utilities like street lighting systems and remote village electrification. For individual households, this is up to 10 lakh rupees per borrower. 3. Investments in renewable energy are on automatic route, i.e. automatic approval for up to 74% foreign equity participation in AJV and 100% foreign investment as equity is permissible with the approval of the Foreign Investment Promotion Board, FIPB. 4. Approval to the amendments in the National Tariff Policy 2005 for promotion of renewable power. Logistics sector. Logistics is the backbone of supply chain, management of flows of goods from the point of origin to the point of consumption. It includes transportation, inventory management, warehousing, materials handling, packaging, and integration of information. Largely unorganized, the sector has remained unexplored in India. As per the latest Economic Survey 2017-18, major statistics which highlight the importance of India's logistics sector are as given below. India's logistics industry is around US to 15 billion in 2020, growing at a CAGR of 10.5%. It provides employment to more than 22 million people. With a 10% cut in the cost of logistics, exports are estimated to grow by 5 to 8%. Though, in terms of overall performance, India jumped to 35th rank from 54th in 2014 in the latest Logistics Performance Index 2016, World Bank. The sector faces numerous challenges which need immediate attention from the government: high cost impacting domestic and global competitiveness, underdeveloped material handling infrastructure, fragmented warehousing, multiple regulatory and policy-making bodies, lack of seamless movement across modes, lack of integrated IT infrastructure and modern technology. Government has identified the action points to develop this sector in an integrated way. These action points are adopting new technology, improved investment, skilling, removing bottlenecks, improving intermodal transportation, automation, single window system for giving clearances, and simplifying processes. To strengthen the sector, the government has created a new logistics division in the Department of Commerce. The sector has been put in the harmonized master list of infrastructure subsector, given infrastructure status by late 2017, which will benefit it in many ways. 1. Cheaper fund or credit at lower rates of interest on longer tenure fund will be facilitated. 2. Simplified process of approval for construction of multimodal logistics parks facilities, which includes both storage and transportation. 3. Increased market accountability through regulatory authority and will attract investments from debt and pension funds. Apart from increasing trade, better performance in logistics will augment the program like Make in India and also enable India to become an important part of the global supply chain. Housing policy. Housing is a key policy priority of the government today. With increasingly fluid population, the housing policy need to enable horizontal or spatial mobility, i.e., movement within and between cities, and vertical mobility, to climb socio-economic ladder as opportunities arise. The Economic Survey 2017-18 highlighted certain factors in this regard when the country is going for an ambitious scheme, Housing for All. Two basic issues related to the sector is rental and vacant houses. Rental housing. Such housing is important for both horizontal and vertical mobility as it allows people to access suitable housing without actually having to buy it. Across the income spectrum, rental housing is an important foothold into a city for new arrivals until they purchase their own homes. For rural migrants, in particular, whose financial portfolios may already be tied up in land and livestock, it is access to shelter that is more important than investing in their own houses that is subject to local market risk. Nonetheless, the share of rental housing has actually been declining in Indian cities since independence from 54% in 1961 to 28% in 2011. Though the country has witnessed a decline in the share of rentals, it is not uniform, it has been sharper in the northern states, excluding the mountain states. Rental is more prevalent in urban areas, 31%, than the rural, 5%, as per the census 2011, with more urbanized states having higher percentages of renting. Vacant housing. Despite the shortage of housing in urban India, more than 18 million households in 2012, there is also a trend increase in vacant houses, 11.1 million in 2011 from 6.5 million of 2001. As per the census 2011, vacant houses constitute around 12% of the share of the total urban housing stock. The number and share of vacant houses for some major cities are: Mumbai has the highest number of total vacant houses, 0.48 million, followed by Delhi, 0.3 million, and Bengaluru, around 0.3 million. In terms of share of vacant houses to total residential stock, Gurgaon ranks highest, 26%. The phenomenon of high vacancy rates is not fully understood, but unclear property rights, weak contract enforcement, and low rental yields may be important factors. The spatial distribution of the new real estate may also be an issue, as the vacancy rates generally increase with distance away from the denser urban cores. Home ownership is encouraged as part of socio-economic policy in most parts of the world, including India. While there is nothing wrong in encouraging home ownership, it needs to be recognized that the rental market is also an important part of the urban ecosystem. Housing needs of India are complex, and policies have been mostly focused on building more homes and on home ownership. In recent decades, several factors have constrained this market in the country, such as rent control, unclear property rights, and difficulties with contract enforcement. India needs a holistic housing policy, which is capable to resolve the existing constraints to the sector and the issues of rental and vacant housing. Recent challenges. Infrastructure sector has been faced with some long-standing challenges in the country. In the period of reforms, government aimed to involve the synergy of the private sector into it. The public-private partnership model was taking ground year after year. But due to certain internal and external factors, the sector almost got derailed by late 2013 to 14. As per various government documents, these factors are as given below. 1. Project delays, which cause high cost overruns. Though the situation has improved after the new government took control, but still around 348 such projects are lingering in the pipeline of approvals at various states. By February 2018, the government announced to classify such projects into different subcategories which can give right information, other than calling all of them as stalled projects. 2. Delays in land acquisition. With the Land Act of 2015 being withdrawn and an effective land pooling policy put in place, things have started improving in this regard. Some states have surplus land in the pooling arrangement, such as Andhra Pradesh. 3. Scarcity of fund due to longer gestation period. With the help of infrastructure investment trusts, 5/25 refinancing scheme, debt restructuring, things improved, but not much. Since late 2017 to 18, the government is pursuing insolvency procedure under the newly enforced Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, and things look taking pace. 4. Weaknesses of the existing PPP models also took a heavy toll. Though it has been improved by the new model of it, Hybrid Annuity Model, HAM. Though the model was put in place for only road sector, it was notified for other infra sectors also by late 2017. 5. Slowdown in the economy kickstarted by the global financial crisis of 2008 together with a state of policy paralysis prevailing in the domestic economy since 2010 onwards. After the new government took control, the state of policy paralysis is no more there, but there are several complex legacy factors which need to be addressed in an effective way. 6. A typical twin balance sheet crisis taking grip over the economy, declared so by the Economic Survey by late 2016 to 17. Due to this, while on one hand the public sector banks are unfit to promote lending, which have been the lead lenders to the sector, hit with high non-performing assets, NPAs, on the other hand big private corporates are not eligible to borrow, due to high losses, and invest in the economy. PMAU. The Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Urban, PMAU, was launched in June 2015 to provide Pakka house with basic amenities to all eligible urban poor by 2022, a part of the Housing for All, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. By early 2020, a validated, by states and UTs, demand of 1.12 crore houses were registered. It is one of the largest housing schemes of the world covering complete urban India. Urban habitats and cities are the epicenters of economic growth, which contribute over 60% of India's GDP. The construction sector accounts for 8.2% of GDP and employs about 12% of the workforce. Therefore, the investment made under PMA-U not only provides Pakka houses to the eligible families to achieve the goal of housing for all, but also triggers multiplier effect on the overall economy. The scheme is being implemented through following 4 verticals. 1. In situ slum development, ISSR, works using land as a resource with private participation, in which the Government of India gives a grant of 1 lakh rupees per house. 2. Credit-linked subsidy scheme, CLSS, provides subsidy to economically weaker section, EWS, and lower income group, LIG, for new house or incremental housing. The EWS is defined as a household with up to 3 lakh rupees annual income and house size up to 30 and house size up to 60 square meters. Both of the beneficiaries get an upfront subsidy at the rate of 6.5% for loans up to 6 lakhs rupees. 3. Affordable Housing in Partnership, AHP, is being run with public or private sector including parastatal agencies, in which a central assistance of 1.5 lakh rupees per EWS house is given. 35% constructed houses are reserved for EWS category. 4. Beneficiary-led house construction or enhancement, BLC, is a segment which promotes houses for individuals of EWS category, under which a central assistance of 1.5 lakh rupees per beneficiary is given. Out of 1.03 crore houses approved till early 2020, 60 lakhs have been grounded for construction, of which 32 lakh houses have been completed and delivered. As per the government, the scheme is expected to complete its target much before the deadline year 2022. National Infrastructure Pipeline. Government has set a target to achieve the GDP of US 1.4 trillion, 100 lakh rupees crores, during 2020-25 in infrastructure, and to further sustain the growth by 2030 another 4.5 trillion US dollars. To enable economy achieve the target of investment in the sector, the government launched on 31st December 2019 the project National Infrastructure Pipeline, NIP. The NIP captures the infrastructure vision of the country for the period 2020-25. This is the first ever exercise undertaken in the country. Designed on PPP mode, this has the following main features. The sectoral shares are, on energy, 24%, roads 19%, urban infra 16%, and railways 13%. Funding will be shared equally by center and states, 39% each, while 22% is supposed to come from private sector. Government expects the private participation to increase to 30% by 2025. Around 42% of the projects under it were supposed to be launched by early 2020. Deliberations on rest of the projects were in the process. The task force which advised for the launch of the NIP has also recommended for required changes by center and states in several key areas such as 1. Developing a robust bond market for infrastructure companies, 2. Speedy resolution of infrastructure disputes, 3. Optimal risk sharing through better and balanced PPP contracts, and 4. Sanctity and enforceability of contracts. The investment target under the NIP looks tough given the past experience of investment done in infrastructure, which has been about $1.1 trillion during the whole decade of 2007 to 2018. However, the period in reference is considered the toughest times for infrastructure projects in the country when they faced hurdles such as profit hit with global slowdown, delays in project clearance, delays in land acquisition, lack of funding, being the main ones. Government hopes that a bouquet of well-prepared projects would be able to attract investment from central and state governments, urban local bodies, banks and financial institutions, private equity funds, and private investors, both local and foreign. Looking at the future, to maintain growth momentum in fast-moving world, India needs to develop industry and infrastructure. The scope for Industry 4.0, Fourth Industrial Revolution, and next-generation infrastructure is enormous, the opportunity which India cannot afford to miss. Industry 4.0 encompasses automation, whereas next-generation infrastructure brings physical infrastructure and technology like Internet of Things, IoT, and automation together to maximize the efficiency of physical infrastructure. Together with timely investment, there is a need of suitable policy interventions to enable India tap the benefits of these emerging ideas.